There's a lot going on in the world right now. It sucks, and for many of us, Dungeons & Dragons is an escape. And we deserve that escape, a chance to have fun with our friends and to be creative together. D&D is meant to be fun, and as the Dungeon Master, it's your job to set the tone for what that fun looks like. Now, if your group just wants fast-paced dungeon crawls and tactical combat, this video might not be for you. But if you're trying to tell a story that means something, one that hooks your players and makes them think, then there are a few serious things you should keep in mind. How do you run a game that doesn't glorify violence? Does racism exist in your fictional world? And if so, how is it portrayed? My name is Kevin, and today I want to talk about how DMs are role models, not just rule referees. I know you're already doing a lot. You're making maps, creating colorful NPCs, balancing encounters that are both fun and narratively satisfying, designing dungeons that make architectural sense, mapping out regional trade routes, inventing new religions, figuring out how far a horse can travel in a day, calculating encumbers because somebody will ask how much a barrel of honey weighs, building custom stat blocks for enemies that the party will ignore, rehearsing voice lines for 12 different innkeepers, planning what happens if your villain dies 3 sessions early, drawing political maps of continents no one's ever visited, and somehow, some way making sure that every side quest ties back into the main story. And in addition to all that, which of course you don't have to do, you should be mindful of how the game shapes how your players behave. The story you tell creates a model of the kind of heroes your D&D party are meant to become. So let's move on over to the next room and talk about that. We've all heard the term Murderhobo, the party or character that kills first, asks questions later, and loots everything that isn't nailed down. On the surface, it feels like a classic fantasy adventure. But when you take a step back, it kind of sounds a lot like colonialism. Think about it. A group of armed outsiders enter a mountain cave, home to a community of kobolds. They kill every last one, take their relics, and return to the local mining village to claim their reward. Now, replace kobolds with a real indigenous culture, and suddenly that heroic quest looks a lot more like a conquest. That story's been repeated throughout history, explorers and empires claiming land that isn't theirs, killing or displacing the people who lived there, and justifying it all under the name of helping civilization. When your D&D party does that, even unintentionally, you have the power to help them see why it's a bad thing. Maybe when the party raids the kobold cave, they find murals, art showing the kobolds' gods, their families, their history. Maybe they meet an elder who tries to negotiate peace. Or maybe, as the party draws their swords, they see children among the kobolds, wavering. This gives the players and their characters more perspective than they had before. They understand that being a hero isn't just about slaying monsters. It's about asking who the monsters really are, and realizing that violence isn't always the right answer. Speaking of kobolds, DMs can accidentally send the wrong message in how they portray fantasy races or species. It's easy to fall into old tropes. All orcs are evil, all elves are noble, and all tieflings are suspicious. But that's not just lazy storytelling, it's dehumanizing. Saying all orcs are evil is basically saying these aren't people, they're monsters. And that mirrors real-world systems of oppression that we don't want to have in our fun D&D game night. If you're playing with a group of people who want to explore fantasy racism, you should be very clear about who is perpetuating it and why. If a kingdom hunts tieflings out of fear and superstition, make that an evil act, not the moral norm. If the mayor of a mining village hires the party to clear out the kobolds of a mountain, he's really just saying he wants access to mine the mountain, and is willing to kill anyone who stands in his way. And look, you can absolutely have a brutal, menacing army of orcs marching on the city, and the people of that city can fear and hate the orcs and want them all dead. But within that army, you need to give them more depth. Show orcs who are conflicted, who believe they're fighting for something righteous, or who have justifiable grievances with the city they're attacking. That gives your players a chance to engage without defaulting to violence, and it teaches them that different doesn't necessarily mean evil. And let's say that army of orcs began as a resistance movement, a rebellion of orcs who've been living in poverty, taking the fight to the nobles who've been exploiting them for generations. Let's talk about poverty. It's the one enemy that adventurers in D&D rarely face themselves, especially at higher levels when you have tens of thousands of gold and platinum. Ever been in a big fantasy city and the DM points out how many beggars and vagrants you see in the streets? How often do we stop and ask why they're there? In the real world, people often say that homelessness is a personal failure, that every homeless person is an addict or that people want to be homeless. But that's not how it works. Poverty is systemic. Housing is stupidly expensive. Healthcare can bury people in debt. Public resources like education and infrastructure disproportionately favor the wealthy. And all of that builds up generation after generation as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Unless your fantasy world is a utopia, if you're referencing poverty, you should reflect how complex it is. When your players wander through the slums of the city, think about how you portray them. Are they just grimy backdrops for disease and crime? Or are they living neighborhoods full of workers, families, and children just trying to survive? Treating the slums like an infestation is just gross. It reinforces the idea that poor people are dirty, dangerous, or expendable. As a DM, you have the power to change that, to show your players that heroism isn't just about slaying monsters. Sometimes it's about compassion, justice, and standing up for the forgotten. As DMs, we hold a lot of power, not just over our stories, but over how our players think about heroism, morality, and empathy. So when you're preparing your next adventure, you should ask yourself, what does it mean to make the characters into heroes? When you create worlds and show up how complicated and messed up they can be, your players will follow your lead. So be the DM that you want your players to be. Build adventures that challenge them to be better, not just at the table, but in the world we share together. That's all I've got for now. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please consider subscribing, liking, and let me know what kind of video you'd like to see next. I've got a lot of ideas, some more serious like this one, and some a little bit more fun and wild, but there's always more to learn and more stories to tell, so thanks again, and I'll see you next time.